recording in progress. There we go. Yeah, no problem at all. So I have some slides. What I will try to do, I know we've got a bit of time, but I'll try to kind of do a bit of an introduction, a bit of background to Bubble and how we use it and what we've learned from it. And, you know, a quick show and tell of Bubble itself, so you can dive in. We can just look at some of the gubbins of it. And you know, try and keep that to a period of time that leaves us open to ask any questions that you've got. You know, plenty of time for Q&A. So I will share my screen, so you don't have to stare at me, but I will come back from time to time, I promise. So you should be able to see a badly drawn Million Labs bottle and a Million Labs. Is that true?
Yes.
Good. Thank you. So who am I? Why the hell would I be talking about this? A very quick introduction to me. In the criminal fraternity, I would be described as having good previous. I've been around the block a little bit. My background's in banking and fintech. I'm co-chair for fintech for one of the regions of the UK. And that's because going back a very long time, I was the product manager at the launch of the first internet credit card at the age of 21 or 22, and parlayed that experience into being head of innovation for Barclays, and then going on to building, launching and selling two fairly successful but not particularly loud, which is the way you want startups to be. Fintech businesses, you don't want lots of attention and no money. You want lots of money and no attention. That's the best way around. And then moved on to assisting the British government and the Russian government on a very politically difficult challenger banking project latterly in my career, which I retired from. So there you go, that's my background. And in 2018, I formed Million Labs because I became interested in what no-code technology would mean for the idea stage founder, on the basis that there's about 5 million new digital tech founders every year in the world, and only about 150,000 of them ever make it through Series A, which is the first formal funding round for the proper venture capital world. So what the hell happens to the rest of them? Well, the barrier to entry used to be technology, and no code had a huge impact on that. So we built Million Labs to focus on what we could create from a financial technology point of view to help them. But to do that, we also needed to master no code technology as well. So what is Million Labs? Million Labs is effectively about 50 technologists who use every no-code platform under the sun to help founders build the first bit of technology they're ever going to build to test and prove their idea. So there are about 400 no-code platforms that we use to do that. Some of them are distinct and do a very specific job, like video conferencing or payments or whatever. And some of them are far more generalistic, like Bubble. We can talk about Bubble because Bubble is winning the race with founders, certainly, which is our core group. I would say 90 to 95% of the founders that walk through Million Labs front door want us to use Bubble. So it gives you an idea of the penetration of Bubble. The usual question is what's next on the list, and next on the list is Softer and Airtable joined together. There's hardly any people doing that. Most people are using Bubble. So Bubble is good friends with Million Labs. We like them, and they've helped us to build all our startups. We also teach thousands of people every year to use Bubble as part and parcel of doing what we do, because there was an opportunity to do it, so we do. So that's who Million Labs are. What is Bubble, and why is Bubble so popular with founders? Well, Bubble is a responsive web app builder, and most of you will have spotted that. But sometimes people conflate app builder with mobile app builder, and we get two messages coming back. The first is that Bubble is a mobile app, a native mobile app builder, and it isn't. And the second is you can't build native mobile apps with Bubble, and you can, but you have to wrap it with a service like BDK. So what is BDK? Well, BDK wraps Bubble's responsive web applications that can be seen and interacted with through a browser, either on your mobile phone or on your desktop. It wraps those browser-based applications and makes them available on iOS or Android app stores. So Bubble can build a mobile application, but mostly it is a responsive web application builder. So it's building apps that can be accessed through a browser. Why do people really, really like Bubble over all of the other platforms? Well, there are plenty of really, really good no-code tools out there, but they tend to do one thing well. So if I wanted an application that helped me build a really, really good looking front end, or a service that helped me build a really, really good looking front end, I'd probably go to something like Software or Webflow, but they don't have a back end strapped to them, so they don't work well. There's no database particularly. You have to go and integrate them with something. If I wanted to run a really good database, I'd use something like Airtable or Xano to do that, but I'd have to go and find a front end for Airtable or Xano. So there's no user interface for those particularly. And then if I wanted to do some kind of automation, so I wanted to go and take data that was in my Google spreadsheet and I wanted to pump it into an email to blast it out to people, or vice versa. Or I wanted to collect inbound emails and put them into a spreadsheet, or any other collection between two applications. I might use Zapier, or I might use Make to do that. So these are all very good applications at one specific thing they do. They're all no code in that you don't need to be able to code to use them. But they're very specific in the thing that they're good at. They don't do the full round trip. Bubble does everything. It enables building a user interface. It enables building a database. It enables you to build automations between two other services. However, it's a jack of all trades. So is it the best design tool? No. Is it the best database? No. Is it the best automation tool? No. But it will do all of those things in one place, and that's why people go to it. It's also really cheap. Bubble's basic plan is about $29 a month, which, if you compare it to some of the other no-code tools, is really low cost. I think, for instance, if you think of a platform like Thunkable, don't worry about what it does, but Thunkable is a no-code tool. They're going to charge you about $3,000 or $4,000 a year at the bottom end. So Bubble massively undercuts that. So let's deal with the first three questions anybody is going to ask when they start thinking about building an application out with Bubble. And the first one is, how scalable is it, right? So can I have my 10,000 users all at once using Bubble to send each other messages? And the answer is Bubble is pretty damn scalable. We put the Portuguese Companies House database on Bubble in one project. We had 80,000 people speed dating through a Zoom style interface on Bubble, and it will handle it. However, you do have to remember that Bubble is a framework built on top of code, built on top of machine code, built on top, it is another layer on top of another language layer on top of lots of other things. And so it's not as quick as everything else. It's very, very slightly slower than an app that you've built in code, right? So will it scale? Yeah, it will. It will scale a long way. Bubble have pricing plans that will let you increase the amount of storage, increase the amount of processing power it has. They will run all the way up to a bespoke stack, your own tech stack running Bubble. But it is still very slightly slower than code. So what do we see people doing with Bubble? We see people building out their MVP, getting to market, winning enough customers to get through seed stage, and slowly but surely, seed stage being the kind of first funding round that people go through, and then slowly but surely iterating various services away from Bubble as they grow. It's a typical journey we see for a startup. That doesn't worry me as an investor or as a tech person, because that's true of a startup journey starting with any piece of technology. No startup builds their application on day one and is still using that application when they are a grown-up business with hundreds of thousands of millions of customers. There is always iteration and change. So Bubble is a very, very good starting platform, and it will go a long way, but founders tend to start to replace bits and bobs of it. You can do that really easily because Bubble is massively extensible. So Bubble's built on 2 API connectors. There is the ability for it to bring data into it. We'll take a look at that later, or to drag services into it. There's also very good outbound, if you like, API capability. So Bubble can create its own webhooks. It can be used as a database by other applications. And that's how it runs its automation. And so using those APIs, you can create really easy relationships between Bubble and the rest of your tech stack. So as a company grows and it starts to want to build their own intellectual property and code, or they want to strap a CRM system or a core banking system or a KYC program or whatever it might be to their Bubble application, it's really easy to do that. So Bubble sits nicely inside a tech stack and will play in a friendly way with everything else. And that means that walking into Bubble isn't a cul-de-sac. It's not something where you go in and you can't get back out again. So it's very extensible. The final point here is somewhat of a bone of contention for me as one of the major players in the no-code space. So is Bubble secure? Bubble is very secure. It's built on AWS. It's using very modern security systems to protect its data, commensurate with any other large technology institution. So data is secured at rest and in transit using kit that I would be happy to use in a bank. And so from point of view of Bubble itself, Bubble is incredibly secure, and it's quite easy to build secure Bubble applications if you follow the right the basic guides that are available to you. The ways of protecting people's data are very simple and easy to understand. The reason I have a bugbear with security in Bubble applications is, sadly, many of the people that are building and releasing applications just don't do it. They don't follow even the basic guides. And so currently there are quite a lot of scarily unsecure Bubble applications in the world. Now, there are quite a lot of scarily unsecure coded applications in the world. So it's not Bubble's fault. But there does seem to be, with a sort of trend of citizen development, a worrying trend of insecure apps. And of course, because Bubble apps, when they're built properly and built well, look just the same as coded applications, it's very hard for users to tell whether their data is secure or not. A couple of horror stories, or the worst horror story I've seen in the past month or so, was a set of founders that had built an application that aggregated people's banking data and financial data, so their transactions, into a flat database that you could access simply by clicking on the inspect key or the inspect thing on your browser. And that's just horrifying. So it can be made secure, but it can also be made insecure, and that is a bit of a concern. So what is Bubble made up of? And we will dig into Bubble in just a moment, but Bubble basically has a structure where it has a design capability. You have a UI editor. You have automation, so workflows. You can create programs that make Bubble do stuff. And then you have a very good database, relational database. It's actually, for those tech people out there that care, it's a Postgres database on AWS, but you don't know that. You just sit as Bubble's database. And it has a very good ecosystem of pre-built external services that they call plugins. So they, a bit like when the iPhone launched years and years ago, and its selling point was that it had millions of apps. So Bubble has millions of plugins that have already been created. So if you want to launch a website where you can do video conferencing, well, there's a plugin for that. If you want to take payments, there's a plugin for that. You want to build a two-sided marketplace, there are plugins to help you do that. So because it's got such, excuse me, such a large ecosystem around it of external services, it makes Bubble a very, very powerful tool for creating stuff. The other thing that is interesting about Bubble as a no-code application is Josh and Emmanuel, who created it, both lovely guys, they wanted it to act like a language. So for the most part, no-code services are sort of a bunch of pre-built blocks. You know, if I think about Adalo, which is a mobile app builder, you know, if I want a map, I get the here is your map block and it's going to look like this. If I want a form, here is your form block and it's going to look like this. And it's not a particularly flexible, there's not a huge amount of flexibility in those building blocks. When Bubble was created, they wanted Bubble to be capable of building anything that looked like anything, so incredibly configurable. And that means that you really can, you know, we'll see this in a moment, you can dig in the Bubble and make anything look just the way you want it to look. And we'll look at some examples of what we've built later. But that also means it's got a bit of a learning curve. Oh, we'll jump into Bubble in a moment, but just on that learning curve. So what does it take somebody to learn how to use Bubble? Well, in 10 hours, you can master the basics of Bubble. So you can build an app, right? 10 hours worth of boot camps will give you all the skills that you need to build a UI, to save data to a database, recall data from the database, edit it, delete it, do whatever you want to do with it. But that will not make you 10 hours does not a developer make. So when we look at the people that have become proficient in Bubble, they've usually taken those initial 10 hours of education and they've gone away and spent the next 3 or 4 months of their life building different applications to hone their skills, right? It's a bit like anything else. You can read a recipe to bake a cake, but you have to bake quite a lot of cakes before you become good at it. So we always say 10 to 15 hours will get you to the point that you understand Bubble itself. But then from a practice point of view, you probably need 3 to 4 months worth of trying out different application builds to get good. And actually in Bubble world, people with a good design eye do a lot better with people than people with a good mind for database architecture, because the thing that Bubble struggles a little bit is nice design. Anyway, so without further ado, let's dig in and take a look at Bubble itself. Let's do that. There you go. There's Bubble. So I won't give you a particularly deep guided tour of Bubble. I just want to show you a few quick examples of Bubbles, of the stuff Bubble does, you know, so that you get an idea for what you can achieve with it, and how you achieve it, right? But if you look at this, it just looks like any other kind of software builder. You have a bunch of recognizable stuff going along the top, like edit buttons and arrange buttons, undo, redo, all that kind of stuff. Because it's like a website builder, you have a concept of pages, so you can create many pages or you can create many things on one page. And then you can see the basic architecture of Bubble in terms of those things that I mentioned before. The up here somewhere, I said it had design, automation, and data storage. You can see, if we look at Bubble, you can see here is our design part of Bubble. Here is our automation part, which they call workflows. And here is our databases, which helpfully they call data types. The external services vest in plugins. So let's just have a look at a couple of quick examples of doing things with Bubble, just to show how quickly stuff can be done, but also to give you an idea of what having complete flexibility to build stuff looks like, right? So if I go to here is my editor, here is a page. I am going to create a full round trip of creating a database, creating a form to put stuff in a database, recalling stuff from that database, showing it and mucking around with it, right? And to do that, I'll build, this is a bit of a tightrope act because I'm not entirely certain what I'm going to build and I'm not a developer, but let's build something that allows me to share photos on a map. Let's do that. So let's first of all create a database. So how easy is it to create a database? Well, let's have a database called photos. And databases have fields. They look like a spreadsheet. Your fields are your columns, your rows in your database are the rows. So we're going to create a few fields, which are going to be our database columns. So let's have the title of the photo, which is going to be a bit of text. Let's have the photo itself, which is going to be an image. And because we're going to put it on a map, we probably also want to have a location. And Bubble is built on it's all of its location data is dealt with using Google's geocoding API. So we can actually give it a geographic address and it will munge that and kick it out as Google geographic data, which is nice and clever. So I have a really boring database, which I can look at as a database. Here is my database. Here are my columns, location, photo, and title, and created date, modified date, and all those other things you would see in a database, and a bunch of rows with nothing in it. So it looks like a spreadsheet. And that's great. So, and in any app, just a brief point, what's the difference between a website builder and an app builder? Database, the ability to interact with a database. That's what Bubble is really powerful at giving you. So I got my database and I want to throw stuff into it. So to do that, I'm probably going to create a form. So let's call this a form. And we're going to do a tiny bit of sensible design by putting it in the middle of the page. Oops, put it back in the middle of the page, Bubble. And let's make it, because Bubble's responsive, we can have things that stretch with the page, grow and shrink. For the sake of argument, I'm going to make this thing a certain width, and I'm going to give it no minimum width so it can grow and shrink with the page. Like all website builders, you can see Bubble has concepts like margins, padding, that allow it to constrain and wrap and fit its elements into a mobile phone page or a giant great desktop page. So in this case, I'm just going to have a very simple form. And I'm going to chuck into that some things that allow me to save data, some form fields. So I will grab a picture uploader so we can upload a picture. This is a pre-built feature of Bubble. It's one of its basic elements. Let's make that 200 high. So, whoops, no, that's its maximum width. I didn't want to do that. I want to make it 200 pixels high. That'll do. Let's have an input that we can chuck our image description into. So that's going to be there. And let's have an address as well. So we'll do that. We'll have an address. We can add a couple of things that allow us to refine this. So I'm going to just chuck a bit of spacing between my elements, so my form looks a bit neater. It's a bit boring, but it'll do. And then the final thing I'm going to do is I'm going to chuck a button on it. And my button is going to be the first place where I deal with an automation. So at the moment, if I look at this in the world of the internet, I have I know what I've done. I've clicked a thing. There is always sod's law when you're creating anything like this, that you'll accidentally untick a box. Don't worry, I'm not going to teach you how to build an app. As I say, it takes us 10 hours to do that. But so if I'm clicking things and you don't know why, there's a boot camp for that. So boring little form sat in a browser. If I put it in a smaller browser, it will start to grow and shrink because it's built to be a responsive design. But again, don't worry too much. So if I want to start saving data to my database, I've got a form, I've got a database, and what I need to do is start creating automations. And in Bubble, we call these workflows. And so when I create a workflow, it creates a little event. So Bubble has a concept of events. When a thing happens, do a thing. You know, when a user logs in, show them something. When a person clicks navigation, take them to a page. So when an event happens, and then I can start to build out a program of defined actions that make my app come to life. So in this case, I'm going to create a group of automations to save my data. And in Bubble, it has its pre-built actions, so they're really easy to find. So I'm going to create some new data. I'm going to save it to my photos database. And I'm going to save 3 bits of information that were the 3 bits of information I created in my database. So I'm going to save a picture, which is going to come from my form, my picture uploader on my form. I'm going to save my location, which is going to come from the box, which is a search box for a location. And I'm going to save my title. I should go and just write in that form, click to upload an image, name of image, just so users know what we're doing, and location. Just give it a bit of clarity as to what we're up to. Right, so now, if I was to go and preview this and run it, and this becomes part and parcel of the Bubble developer's life, they create a thing that does a thing. We're going to upload a photo. We're going to name that photo something when it uploads. Okay, red shirt guy. And we're going to say red shirt guy was in Newcastle. There we go. I'm going to save that. And nothing's happened because there's absolutely no feedback to the user on that button. When they click save, they cannot see anything. And this talks to why we build programs. We only have one action here, which creates a line in the database with a photo in it. And it actually has done that. There's the photo, it's in the database. But because we didn't have anything else in that workflow to give any feedback to the user, they don't know that that's happened. So they're just going to keep clicking the save data button. So we start having to create a longer program that does things like resets the inputs in the form, and maybe, oh, I haven't got a thing to pop up a message to say saved, but maybe I would do that. But even with that little action of resetting the input in the form, if I now do this, and I add a different thing, right, because I know it's pink, location, I don't know, Lichfield, brilliant city, Lichfield, recommend coming. That's where I live. The form has now cleared itself, and I know that something's happened, right? There was some kind of feedback. Anyway, still relatively boring, still not doing anything of any interest, but there's a reason that I've shown you this, which is the journey of any application is save data, and then it's do something with the data, reload the data, make it visible, make it available to people. And so if I were to do something clever like, how wide was that? Just so I know, 450. If I was to put a map on here, where are maps? Give me a map. I know it's there somewhere. Map, there you go. Let's chuck a map on the page. There. And let's put that in the middle. And this map, I'm going to tell this map to go into my database and grab my photos that I've created. I'm going to tell it how to get those photos. For this purpose, I'm just going to tell it to go and get all of them. You don't need to really worry, but this data search, this is searching the database and pulling data back. I'm going to tell it to get its address from the location field, and it knows that's an address because it's a geographic address in the database. And I'm going to show when somebody clicks my title markers, the description that I put in down here. So now when I launch this, I'm not only capable of creating data in the database, but I also got a map over here, which as I create stuff, pink guy and the red shirt guy, we're already on my map. So let's create something else and chuck it into Manchester. Boom, Manchester. Let's green loading. And if I pick her location and I say her location is going to be Manchester in the UK, and I save that, she's up on the map as well. Manchester. Full round trip of creating data, pulling data back and chucking it into an interface. The most boring and simple interface on earth, but it's starting to give you a sense of how you take data from one place, you put it into a database and you bring it back to do a thing. Now, if I was going to spend more time on this, I might create a thing that allows me to click one of these markers and see the picture of the green lady. I've already seen the picture of the green lady. To show that I can interact by pulling data back and throwing it somewhere else. But if I think about all applications, if I think about, I don't know, I had 1 million labs because that's my own application. And if I go and look at a blog, all of our blog posts are rows in a database. And when somebody goes and pulls that row from the database, it throws the data onto the page. This is a row in the database, so is that picture, so is everything else. It's pulling data from somewhere and it's putting it somewhere, and that's the heart of building applications. So let's move on to a second quick example of what can be done with Bubble. So let's look at pulling in an external service and making that do a thing, right? So more often than not, when we're thinking about Bubble itself, we don't want to just build everything in Bubble. We want to pull in something really clever that makes a very powerful thing happen. And we don't want to code it. We want somebody else to have coded it for us. A classic example is I want to take a credit card payment from somebody, right? So I want every time somebody posts something to the map, I want to bill them $1. I'm going to charge them $1. So I mean, they're going to be mad. I mean, it's a crazy thing to pay $1 for, but I want to do that. And I want that to be really simple. Well, fortunately, somebody in the world of plugins has already created an enormous amount of Stripe plugins, loads of them, all sorts of Stripe plugins for doing all sorts. I mean, Stripe is one payment service. You might not recognize it. So if you don't recognize it, PayPal is another, and others are available. All of these plugins allow you to bring in a service from something. I'm searching the plugins. All of these plugins allow you to bring in a service like Stripe and just drop it on the page and make it do a thing. You need to have signed up for that service. So you need to have gone to Stripe's website and signed up and said, I want to open a Stripe bank account. And in the case of a bank account, probably provided them with some KYC and whatever else. But at the end of doing all of that, they will give you the API key that you need to set up your Stripe service with Bubble. And if I was to drop a Stripe service on here, as I have just done, you're going to see that actually this doesn't need any API keys, but they usually do. I don't know why that one doesn't, but usually they'll ask you for your API key to make it work. Now, we have one that's already created here. I'm not going to open that because it's got a bunch of API keys that access our own Stripe system. But I do want to show you how it works in Bubble and how simple it is. So because I've installed that Stripe plugin here, I can now in my workflow add another action, which is down here in payments. I'm going to charge the current user. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to charge the current user $1, $1. We need to know who it is, so I'm going to use the current user's name. There is already somebody logged in. There's a test user logged in. The description is going to be post a photo, and that will pop up in the checkout. We need a photo to go in the checkout, so let's use I know 1 million labs logo for that. Let's chuck a logo in there. We will put a description on their statement when it comes through on their bank statement of thanks for the photo. And that's about it. That's about all the things that we need to do. So we're going to charge them. And then once we've charged them, we will create our photo and we'll set the relevant input. So one simple bit of configuration to do. So now if I go run this, I've still only got one button. Let's create another photo. Let's just make it an orange thing. Orange. Location is going to be, I don't know, where are we going to put it? We'll put it in Leeds, 30 Leeds. And if we click this, fingers crossed, up pops a Stripe checkout. Actually, because this has been used for testing, it's not asking me for all my payment details, but I can chuck my test payment details in here. 424242 isn't my normal credit card. And if you try and use it, it won't do anything, nor is my name, whatever that is. But if I click pay, this will process a payment from that test credit card, give me a green light, tell me that it's been paid, and chuck another marker on the map. Simple as that. And if that was, this is a test application, that was a test checkout, but if this was the real world, I would now have a buck in my account without having to have done any coding or anything else. And that's full of, if I'd wanted to, you know, start a video conferencing call or do any of those things, I can use a plugin for that too. So there's one final thing I wanted to do in a quick rundown of Bubble itself. I wanted to just show you Bubble's API connector and the power of Bubble's API connector, or a simple test of it, just to show you the sort of the ability or the extensibility of Bubble. So instead of using my own database, the ones that I've created and pulling data out of that database, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to an external service like News API. News API is a website that provides news articles via API. It is full of every article from every newspaper you can possibly imagine. And if I wanted to create a flow of today's news, it would be a good service for me to do that. So the data is sitting in their database, not mine. Just like any other API, I need to go and get an API key. I don't mind you stealing that one because it's a free service and you can wear it out if you want to. But if I start with a new interface here, what am I going to do? Oh, okay. So I'm going to go to my plugins, and you can see I have one called API connector. So this connects me to external services. And I'm going to add a new API, which I'm going to call news list. Let's do that. And when I create an API call, I need to tell it, am I going to go get data? Am I going to send data somewhere? Am I going to trigger off an action? What am I going to do? Well, I'm going to use this to go and get data because that's what this is. It's an external database provider. And they have a very, very, very simple way of getting data. So they have a simple URL, which you reach out to trigger off their API, which is News API's org's everything API connector, or API endpoint, as it would be called. And to quiz this API, I need to provide it with what kind of news I want. So I'm going to tell it that I want, for now, let's just call that query. I want to go and get news about Elon Musk. That could be my first test. To identify myself, so I need my API key. So I'm also going to have an API key. Big long number that we saw a minute ago. There's that one there, which tells this service provider that I am me. So they've given me an API key which identifies me. API. I'm going to put that in there. Simple as. I'm going to test this and it's going to go wrong. Yeah, because it doesn't know what my browser is for some reason. It's having a funny 5 minutes. So I need to give it a user agent. Don't worry about this. Do I need that in parameters or do I need that hidden? No, it's in the header. Just like Blue Peter, I had one of my developers do this earlier for me just so I didn't get it wrong. Because otherwise I would, if it was buggy. That's capitals. And then this is just because it needs to know for some reason what my user agent is. So I'm going to go and get that from my browser right now. Yeah, my user agent. That's what it is. So let's check that in that box. Right, there we go. And if I run that, cool, that sets up my database connection. So this little thing here is telling me that I now have a connection to that news provider's database. So I can go and find data from them and use it in my app instead of using my own database. So what I'm going to do with this data, I'll just check I've got it all set up right, is I'm going to now go into my UI. And in this case, I'm going to create a lovely table of news stories. So let's do that. Let's have that be rows. That's going to make this a little bit bigger so that we can see it. Let's have a nicer looking group. So we'll make it a little bit prettier. And then let's create our news stories in it. So let's put that in the middle of the page. Come on, play ball. Thank you. So my news stories are going to be from data source. What do we call that API? Get data from an external API news list. That's good. Cool. And we're going to have a list of articles. There we go. And now all I need to do is design a little table. So I will have, what will I have? I'm going to have the news articles headline, title, it calls it, fair enough. I'm going to have let's just group this in a, apologies for a little bit of nif naf and trivia, just to tidy this up a bit. That's better. Let's give that a little bit of a space between things so it all looks neat. So we'll have its article's title. We will have a description of the article, I think. Why not? And maybe we'll have a picture from the article as well. The article's description. Maybe we'll have a URL so that we can go click and go to the article. And we will have the picture from the article. Picture, 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 picture. There we go, image. And let's make that wide enough to fit. So if I preview this, oh yeah, I didn't tell the picture what it needed to be. That's going to be image. Good. So if I preview this to begin with, we have loads of news about Elon Musk pulled from an external database. But also, I could just do one more thing. Elon Musk has been doing lots of stupid things of late. I could just do one more thing, which is I am going to make this a dynamic search. So instead of having it just be done, let's have this go and get data from there. That's why, hang on. Let's get this, go and get data from there, but let's allow it to search the database by pulling in the search term from the input. So if I do that, we shouldn't have anything in that list to begin with. But if I type in there, we've got no code, that should pull back lots of no code advert, lots of no code news from somebody else's database. So Bubble can act as I mean, this is just a database call. So this is going and getting call from an external database. I could be triggering off something like I did with that payment. I could trigger an external service like send a call to an API endpoint that sends a tweet that saves something to my database that sends as API link or whatever, right? I can automate lots and lots of things this way, but it just shows that Bubble's capable, and that was quick, right? I mean, it is fast at pulling back data from external databases, which is how we replace Bubble's database as startups grow if they need us to. So really, really, really quick and dirty, what can we do with Bubble? We can make simple interfaces that allow us to do anything. And these were all designed in inverted commas on the fly. It could have been green, pink, orange. They could have looked like anything. Bubble's driven by a really powerful style sheet. So, you know, if I want to restyle the application, I can just go change it in the style sheet without having to bother about doing it the way I've been doing it here. But it's completely flexible in its design. You can make it look however you want to make it look. But this just gives you an idea of how you can use the database in concert with the front end, how you can use external services, and how you can use Bubble to trigger off some quite smart stuff. Moving just on to a kind of a final few examples. So what have we done with Bubble? Well, we built things like Strabo. Strabo is one of my favorite apps because it's a now seed stage fintech which uses open banking and crypto API to show people their current financial holdings and allow them to forecast their financial holdings going forward as well, right? So it's a highly complicated little balance sheet tool for financial planning and managing their personal financial position globally, by the way. It will do that all over the world, right? Because it was built for its target audience is expats, people that hold funds in all sorts of different currencies, assets in all sorts of different currencies. It is an extremely powerful example of what can be done with Bubble itself, and has grown up to be quite a successful little app in and of itself. Another example would be CZ, the fastest funding I've ever seen for a startup. So CZ is a Bubble application that allows people to record their video CVs and record video job adverts, quite a current trend for recruitment. CZ was built on Bubble in 50 hours, launched and raised $1 million worth of funding in 5 weeks on a $6 million valuation, which made me very happy because I own 7% of it. And, you know, is now growing like weeds. And they are going through the journey of making the application more powerful and scalable because they've won relationships with some rather large brands like Emirates and others. So they're a great example of what can be done. And if you want to go the full journey with no code, staying within the kind of Million Labs roster, you've got startups like BCB Group. If we look at the news on BCB, no, maybe not. Recent news on BCB was that they completed the large, that's not BCB Group, I don't know what that is. They completed the largest raise for a crypto company in the UK and bought a European bank this year. And they started out a little while ago now with a no-code platform, right? So they started out the same way. So, you know, that's a really, really quick look at what can be done. But actually, some of my favorite startups are the really, really, really simple ones, you know, the ones that are doing the most basic stuff with Bubble as a let's get started and test what we can do. There's a great app called Collate. And I'm going to have to see if I can find it this way. If not, I'm going to have to find it There we go, Collate. So Collate are a letter writing app, really, really, really simple application, which allows people to write beautiful letters to people like AOC and create a kind of mass, push, lobbying spirit of the generation kind of stuff. It started off as a very simple literally letter writing interface. You could write letters, and they started out by printing the letters out and putting them in a gallery. And then slowly but surely they moved up to allowing people to read letters and share letters online. And finally they created a social media, a social network around those letters. And Collate, a bit like the others, has started to grow like weeds. Incredibly simple idea. It's just a letter writing interface that didn't allow people to even have bold or italics in their letters. They just had to write it like it was written on a typewriter. Beautiful little idea. So anyway, there's an awful lot thrown at you in a short space of time. A few things that I would say, kind of final points. Where do you go if you want to get started with Bubble? Bubble themselves have a bunch of boot camps listed through their website. We have been Bubble's boot camp providers of choice for a very long time, and we provide a free Bubble boot camp. It is completely free. We don't sell people anything. They just come and learn. They can walk out the back door. That you can come to, and that teaches the basics of Bubble. Runs 2 different days in every week, and that's available, but others are available too. There are seas of videos on how to build stuff with Bubble, lakes of videos on YouTube that you can dig into, and all sorts of blog content out there as well that you can get started with. And of course, there is a we teach 500 people in a quiet month and 1,000 people in a busy month how to build with Bubble. And so there are lots and lots of Bubble freelancers out there, lots of Bubble developers out there, ranging in price from $20 an hour up to $150 an hour, depending on what they're doing. So getting help is not hard anymore. So I think to finish up from my point of view, I'm conscious I've probably run for an hour and my voice gets a bit dull even for me. To finish up, Bubble has massively revolutionized the ability for founders to launch tech startups. And that last startup I showed, BCB Group, is a unicorn. You can go all the way to being a unicorn having started with no code. It has foreshortened the process of proving an idea, and therefore the amount of time it takes to raise the first round of funding for a startup, which is the world I live in. But even if you're using it in a pre-existing business, the ability to take what is today a process of somebody manually doing something and turn it into solving the problems that things like Access and all those other platforms were supposed to solve years ago, like internal automation and making your business more efficient. It is incredibly powerful for that too. There you go. Enough on Bubble. I shall open the floor for Q&A. And if you've got any questions at all, happy to take them. Hope that was okay, Adam.
That was brilliant, Jof. Really good. I don't know about anyone else, but I got tons out of that. It was really. I haven't seen Bubble in action, and just from a personal point of view, it kind of some people in the room will this may resonate with, or they may laugh at me, but having come from an open source space where there was sort of Drupal and WordPress were the two sort of things, I'm now starting to feel like sort of Softer and the likes and Bubble have a similar comparison. They would call Drupal the developers system. And kind of the WordPress is the designers, and I think that's an interesting comparison. But I love the fact that it's what I call lowest common denominator. There's nothing there, and you have to build it all, and that gives you the maximum amount of flexibility, right? Rather than that concept of having lots of pre-made things, which is great for speed and but having very little flexibility over them. Does anyone have yeah, so
Got one in the chat.
classic question when it comes to no code in general. What's the deal with IP? That's from James.
Great. It is a really good question. I'll answer it from an investment point of view rather than a Bubble point of view. So Bubble is configuration, it's not code. And therefore, a lot of people think about, well, I can get a lawyer to take my lines of code and protect them, but I can't get configuration protected. You can, of course, protect working practices. It's a lot harder to do. But the truth is that in 25 years of being involved in investing and banking, I can tell you that there's an old phrase from lawyers: contracts are only as good as your ability to pursue them. I have only seen one IP case that made more money than it lost in my entire history, which was an enormous, very well protected code IP case against Apple, Amazon, and Azure in cloud computing, and it cost us 4 million to pursue it. We won 7 million. So the problem is that IP is incredibly expensive to protect worldwide, and even more expensive to pursue if somebody breaches it. And if you're building 99.9% of startups, what you're trying to protect with an IP lawyer is you're barking up the wrong tree. I'm sorry if there's an IP lawyer in the room, by the way. What the bigger challenge you've got in a startup, the protection you get, the moat you get in a startup is traction. You get there first, you get loads of people using your thing, your name becomes the name that gets linked to something, and that traction gives you far more protection than a whole boatload of very, very expensive IP lawyers give you. So no, you can't protect Bubble's lines of code because you don't own them. It's configuration, so it's all built into Bubble, but it doesn't matter anyway. And unless somebody is a very unqualified investor, they're probably not going to worry about that. Have we ever hit any scalability limits with Bubble? I hope that answered the question, by the way. Happy to chat further on that. Have you ever hit any scalability limits with Bubble? Yes, we have. The biggest problem comes from applications that require what's a good example? So if I've got tens of thousands of rows of financial data and I'm using it to analyze something all at once, I want to go down into all that data and analyze from all of these trades that happened every second, what was the right point to make an investment based on everything I've seen, right? This is tough for Bubble. The other thing that's tough for Bubble is trying to wedge boatloads of data into it all at once. So if I'm trying to upload massive, great data sets into Bubble, it doesn't like it. And that's where we start to look at using external data sources to solve that problem, and Bubble becomes the UI. But for most stuff, so, for instance, users is not a huge problem. So if I was social networking, and I've got concurrent user concerns, Bubble doesn't really worry about because a lot of the processing is happening browser side rather than server side. It doesn't really struggle. So it depends on the mix of what you're doing. But if you're trying to use it for massive data analysis, it sort of goes a bit it starts to wince. But for most stuff, it will scale to 10 million turnover and tens of thousands of users and never bat an eyelid. So it's pretty good. And even if you do start to make it grown, if you've got the money, Bubble will build your tech stack out for you and stop it doing that. But that tends to suggest you've got to that size to be able to do that. You're on $1,000 a month type pricing at that stage.
Which, to be fair, you can often pay for a normal server architecture, right? So it's I've got one in terms because you brought up there a couple of times about the speed in terms of using Bubble as the front end effectively and bringing in data into it. I've personally been using Webflow quite a bit and really impressed with that in terms of as a design tool. It really is really fantastic. Would you say Bubble performs well as a or even would you choose Bubble as from a headless perspective, kind of using something like Webflow as the front end, or is that
Ben has just pointed in the right direction. If I was going that way, I'd probably use Xano or Airtable as a Airtable as a short-term solution and Xano as a longer-term solution, or maybe something like back-endless.
I find Airtable really restrictive in terms of just that 50,000 limit. I mean, obviously you could, again, get them to build the architecture out for cost, but yeah, I mean, I love Airtable. It's one of my favorite things, but yeah, so that's kind of why I was asking, was whether, because also you get the automation in there, which I think, the workflow stuff looks, because it's based around actions that are being triggered rather than kind of just data that's being triggered, that you can access the plugins and what have you. It's way more powerful than the automations, for example, in the likes of Airtable. But
Xano's like the journey for databases for most no-code startups goes Bubble, Xano, building out a proper SQL stack, and because Xano is just a phenomenal interim solution, and they want to scale they go a lot further.
Right.
We had a really good example of a Xano case, which was came through Bubble's Immerse program, and was a New York real estate business. And they had 84,000 properties that they wanted to hold data about and allow people to analyze, and they didn't want to go for a full, in fact they tried to go for a full build out and fucked it up. So we used Xano, and it just worked. It was pristine, because in that case it got that same big data analysis problem. So it tends to be the intermediary step that most people take. And you're right, it also has a slightly tougher learning curve, because it's more towards a grown-up database solution than a spreadsheet, which is kind of where Airtable is. Google Sheets and then Airtable, and you ratchet that through.
Does that answer your question as well, Ben?
Yeah, it does. That was great. Thanks, Jof. Yeah, I just didn't realize that you were going about the same thing, Adam, when I hit the end. But no, that's good.
I think it's that stacks thing, right? I know there's a bunch of people at the minute. Actually, our speaker next month is doing the same thing, but looking at no code stacks. Do you know what I mean? And what combination of things you can use. And I think your point was really resonated, Jof, at the start, of the fact that actually one of the strengths of Bubbles is that it's got everything there, as it were. But on the flip side, I mean, one of the biggest things I've heard about Bubble is actually there's the steep learning curve, but obviously I think any highly configurable thing is always going to have a steeper learning curve, right? So that comes with the but the one thing that I've heard quite regularly is, as you've mentioned on and off as well, is the speed. It's about the power of how fast that database can actually work. But again, it sounds like it just depends what you're doing, right?
Yeah, and I will say for Josh and Emmanuel, if you talk to them, that's where they just raised 100 million, and that's where all the money's basically going. It's all on how do we, because for them the end game is how do we have enterprises on this. There's no money in millions of founders. Yeah. They're skint. So this is the story of my life. But if they can grow startups up into enterprises, or indeed attract enterprises, so that's where their investment's going, and it has noticeably improved its performance over the time we've been using it.
How would you rate I mean, I didn't see much there, but from the front end side of things, one of the greatest things about Webflow is, for me, is that it's really, it's kind of like a CSS editor without having to know CSS, right? But all you really are doing is changing values in the CSS, and it keeps it that clean. And that's what I really like about it, having been a sort of back in the days of tables, but being a front end person more than a back end person. Would you say is the front end tools, have they got a fair bit of work to do in terms of that side of things, or?
It has got better. The release of the responsive engine helped, and they're just doing a sort of a library of pre-built things, because they know that it's not great, right? It's not, you have to design from scratch effectively. And the reason for that is, in Webflow, when you get a template, it is kind of a template. You can fiddle with it to your heart's content, and it's understandable in the idiom of something like Squarespace or Wix, if you've come from that world.
Yeah.
Whereas in Bubble, the templates are almost an intermediate tool. You install them, but it's a pre-built app. And so the second you delete something or you move something and you know what you're doing, you're in a hell of panic. In fact, it massively helps Million Labs because the agency team picks up a good sort of 50 or 60 hours of work a week from people going, I've just deleted something in this template and I don't know what to do. That's great. But I guess the other thing is, if you are capable of starting from the kind of templates that you've got in Webflow, you start from something pretty beautiful. In Bubble, because you're forced into this starting from scratch, it's kind of asking everybody to be a designer. And design is as I really know, is a tough skill. It's web design is something to respect. And so web designers don't really struggle so much with Bubble. It's not the best design tool they're ever going to use, but they deliver beautiful apps. But for most people, it pushes that curve up, and we get a lot of fairly ordinary looking applications.
It's the biggest comparison that I make to the reason why I mentioned Drupal, because it was the same thing. It has and had so much power that you could pretty much build anything you want with it, right? It's that kind of Bubble and pretty much in a no-code way. It's like I didn't code anything and I managed to build some pretty extensive, huge systems. But to get it to look pretty, you needed a proper front-end developer, because you needed to build these things out as and I think that's where I was seeing Webflow as being an intermediary there, in the sense that as you say, with the templates, but even without the templates, even starting from scratch to a degree, with a basic knowledge of CSS and HTML and a basic eye for design, you can still design some pretty beautiful things. So it's kind of it's just trying to it's a classic balance of beauty over speed, form, and function, right? So it's trying to get all those bits right. But it sounds like Bubble can do the lot if you've got the right people doing it.
If you've got the skills, yeah. And I think, what would I say? We as human beings, it's a bit like it's the old meal comparison, isn't it? If you go to a restaurant, your meal looks beautiful but tastes okay, you tend not to complain. If your meal looks like a dog's dinner, you don't get to tasting because you start complaining. And it's a bit the same with Bubble applications. People will sort of say, well, it doesn't look great, and therefore it obviously doesn't function very well, and that diminishes the power of the thing. So when you do see a well-built and beautiful Bubble application, all of a sudden you realize how far it can go, and it can go a long way. It can do some truly stunning things. In fact, it's really nice, because there's lots of people come through Million Labs and I don't know every single one of them. I don't get to speak to everybody, and so once in a while I'll see a Bubble app come out. God, that's beautiful. Who did that? And it's one of ours. I'm like, wait, because I'm surprised at how well somebody's done with it. So we still have that thing with Bubble apps that we expect them to be a little bit sort of rough around the edges, but when they're beautiful, they're great. They really are good.
Great stuff. Yeah. Any other questions, Ben? You look like
I was going to ask one. So you touched on the Bubble being used for mobile apps, Jof. But as long as it's like wrapped and stuff, how do they kind of fare? I mean, I've played around with the Dalo and I've built like a bit of an app in the Dalo, but the main thing I've like kind of stumbled with is like the scalability issues. And it's like, as soon as I get more users on, like the costs are going to go through the roof. And it's like, I'm not going to do that because I can't afford it. So like I'd never considered Bubble as for building for mobile, because I thought it was merely like web apps, like you said. People sometimes just don't understand. But I had like looked at Thunkable as well, but I didn't realize that was as expensive as it was. So how does it like fare? Is it the fast kind of thing? Like, how difficult is it to go from building it from a web application to then go, right, okay, it's now a native mobile app?
It depends what you're doing, right? So for the most part, it's pretty damn good, actually. There are some things you can't access. So you can't access the gimbal in the phone. You wanted to do something that accesses you can't do that. So there are some restrictions, which actually mostly are there as sort of privacy protections and things. So if we had an application recently where a guy wanted to suck every photo in somebody's phone into Bubble and then do stuff with it won't do that. You can do it manually, one by one. So there are some restrictions, but the apps themselves, a bit like we were just saying about design, they can look beautiful and they can be pretty damn quick. There's I guess the difference with like Adalo, or actually there's a nice platform coming along called Arpeggio. They're built for you to press a button and it goes boop, and it does the work to spit it into the App Store for you. Whereas with Bubble, you sort of have to go get a service and you have to get somebody to test, and so it always ends up being a $1,500, $2,000 problem when you take into account all of the licensing cost and work involved and everything else for founders that are taking that extra step. So it's not the perfect solution for it. It wasn't built to do that, but it will do that. And I think if I look at, forgive me for always talking about startup founders, but it's what we do. But if I look at their journey, most people will start out with a web application and then test the mobile application through that wrapping service, because, you know, $1,500 is less than 20, 30, 40, 50 grand to get a native app built. And if it turns out that the thing's absolutely flying, then they go that extra step of a journey and invest in something that's going to build their native app out properly for them. So it's a good testing the water thing. And unlike Adalo, where you're restricted to what Adalo can do and the pricing's horrible, with Bubble, you're doing everything all at once in one place. So it's the same database, it's the same workflows, it's the same service calls out to other data, you know, so you're handling all of your tech in one box. So there's the other benefit of it.
Thank you.
Swings and roundabouts, I suppose.
Anyone else have a question for Jof?
I think we're done.
Cool. James, just before you shoot off, yes, I put the recording on YouTube. We've got a YouTube channel, so I'll put it on there. Great stuff. Right. Well, that was, my brain's just rushing now, and I haven't got any single time to do it. I might, Jof, I'll follow up with the email. I know you sent me an email recently about last week when I was at Web Summit about the doing, I think there's probably people here and also people in the wider community who'll be super interested in doing a bit of a boot camp. So it would be really cool to look at maybe organizing something. And I think it'd be quite nice if it's possible, feasible through the way you do them, to do like a Northeast one or whatever, so we can
absolutely.
That would be super cool. And I think, as I say, it's come up time and time again. There's even 2 or 3 people that I know really wanted to learn about Bubble and who aren't here today. So obviously they can check the video out. But it would be good just to start looking at how we could be doing some boot camps and hopefully getting Bubble in the Northeast, because I can't say I've actually heard of a single Bubble developer in the region as of yet. So hopefully we'll have some new ones after today. Yeah. But yeah, no, huge thanks again for stepping in at fairly short notice, and just that was super interesting. I think the background in terms of startups and things as well is hugely valuable for a lot of the work that people in the room are doing as well. So really appreciate it. Just a quick mention to everyone that our next event is, he looks through the diary quickly, Tuesday the 6th of December, and we're going to be looking at the status of no-code syncing data across no-code platforms. We've got one of the founders of WhaleSync from the US coming. That one will be online.
Cool guys.
Yeah, and WhaleSync's a really nice tool that I've been using quite a few things recently, and really fills a gap. So he's Matthew from WhaleSync will be telling us a bit about the things they're doing, but also what else is out there and how it all fits together. So that should be great. So I'll send out details of that on our mailing list in the next couple of days. But thank you very much everyone for coming. Thank you very much, Jof, for being with us, and see you all next time.
Thanks very much.
Thanks everyone.
Have a great evening. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
guys. Thanks from Jason.
No worries, Dan.
All right, cheers, Adam. Take
it easy. See you soon. Bye bye.